In 2017, I remember sitting in a conference room in the J&J Synthes building in Warsaw, Indiana. I remember looking up at a whiteboard with a schematic of a pump. Next to it, it said, quote, "Do not erase." As a fresh engineer out of grad school, my interest peaked, and I realized that a highly regarded engineer at the company was on a mission to create a unique pump that would provide reliable and sustainable access to water that would build the foundation to alleviating poverty worldwide. To this day, I remember looking at that whiteboard and just thinking, that's cool. The engineer behind what's now called the Life Pump is Abe Wright. He reached out to me a few months ago after listening to my podcast, and first of all, what an honor it is to have him as a fan. But he wanted to connect and chat about some of the organizations I've highlighted on the podcast. What's funny is that we barely ever had a conversation when we worked in the same building for a full year. But now, this podcast has brought us together around the same mission, global health. This episode is special because it not only highlights how Abe and his team are serving the planet through research and development of products that serve humanity, but it's also a story of someone who took a leap of faith from a steady and seemingly secure engineering position at J&J, all the way to leading a nonprofit in the global health space. I think this episode is not only for my people in tech and engineering, but also for those who maybe want a little bit of a push to take action on your dreams and desires. Abe took a leap of faith from full-time engineer at J&J to now the co-founder and chief technology officer of a nonprofit called Design Outreach. So here's a little bit about him before we dive in. Abe worked 20 years in the medical device sector and is named as an inventor on 30 different U.S. patents. As Chief Technology Officer, he leads the research and development team, which includes full-time staff and an extensive network of volunteers, many of whom are world-class subject matter experts in their respective fields. He studied mechanical engineering and received a bachelor's from Messiah University and a master's from the University of Denver. Abe, his wife Lisa, and 3 children live in Columbus, Ohio. My name is Hethel Bauman, and this is the Global Health Pursuit. Abe, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I am really excited to chat with you because I think it was like in 2017, I had first learned about you. And I think you were still working at Synthes at J&J in Warsaw. And I always heard, amazing things about you, how great of an engineer you were or are. And I remember going into a conference room and seeing, I think it was like one of your very early on like schematics of Life Pump. Do you remember? Because I remember, it's so crazy because I was like, what's that? And then I remember you doing a lot of like fundraising around campus, and I was always curious like back then, and I know we haven't like, that was a time where we weren't really crossing paths too often, but I think it's just coming full circle now because
it is,
and now I get to talk to you about it. And I just remember like I'm very visual, so I just remember like a vivid picture where I'm just sitting, I don't even remember which conference room it was, but it was on the knees side of the building, and because I remember you worked on the knees side of of things. And just to give you guys context, Abe and I worked for Synthes joint reconstruction out in Warsaw, Indiana. So he worked on the knees group, and I was in the hips group. And
we didn't talk to each other very often,
Nope, we did not. When I was doing my internship in knees, I spoke to Dan Lasher, if you're listening to this, a lot because he was my mentor during that internship. But I just remember learning about design outreach just is so in the early stages of things. So it's so funny. Yeah, totally full circle. But I really want to dig into design outreach, but also just your story in terms of, what brought you to even think about creating Life Pump, which is that first project for design outreach.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tuttle, for having me on. I mean, first of all, thanks for the warm welcome.
Of course.
And the nice things that you said. It's always fun to reconnect. I feel like there's like a camaraderie, like of former Depew Synthes hip and knee folks,
Yes.
So it's always good to reconnect. And I know we reconnected earlier this year, just as I listened into your podcast. So really need to see what you're doing in global health as well. Yeah, 2017, that would have been about 5 or 6 years after we kind of originally had the idea for Life Pump and design outreach. It all started when, well, for me, I personally started a lot earlier. So I go back to the summer before my senior year in high school, when I was on a summer ministry trip with my church denomination. We were in Southern California. I thought it was super cool. I was a kid from Indiana, and
Yep.
I was like, oh man, California's cool. I want to move out here. This is awesome. Then
Well, let me tell you. So I'm originally from New York. So
Okay.
when I got the phone call that I was going to be doing my internship within the leadership program at J&J in Warsaw, I was like, where what?
Where's
Why?
this place?
Where's Warsaw? Apparently it's the orthopedic capital of the world. Yeah. It's
Yeah, and
funny.
especially if you're trying to recruit and bring people in the winter to work, it's a hard sell.
Yep.
It's really nice in the summer, but with the lakes and stuff. But yeah, so I grew up in Warsaw, and but for 3 days while I was in Southern California, for 3 days the group I was with, we went to Tijuana, and we had an immersive experience, like in the barrios, in the informal neighborhoods there. They had a dorm that was built out of just pieces of plywood, and they had carpet remnants on the floor. We were using the latrines. We couldn't drink the water.
Right.
And, playing with the kids in the street, and all of that was like first time for me experiencing poverty like that. Seen on TV, and, suddenly my mindset changed from, wow, I'm, poor me, I'm from Indiana. I was like, wow, I have so much to be grateful for, like Indiana.
Well, talk more about that. Right. Well, talk more about that, because I think, we're sitting on our couches and you're watching TV, and then you see a commercial for Save the Children or something like that, and then the next second your favorite TV show is on. And so it's like such a weird dichotomy, right? But then once you're actually immersed in, like, on the ground and like you feel the difference in temperature and all of, it's just a different experience.
It is. I've been to now Central America and Africa so many times, and it's so hard to explain it to people and feel like you're doing justice when you get back. And I think a lot of that's just, engaging all of the senses, and then meeting people, actually putting names to issues, and realizing this is personal for a lot of people, and it's not just pictures on a screen. And this is people's lives, families trying to survive, and kind of going through all the daily motions that we go through, but on a different level. Yeah, it makes it real. Yeah, so that for me anyway, that was where, I happened to be a person of faith. So I felt like for me, that's where God was speaking to me, like saying, like, hey, what are you going to do with your life? I've given you so much. And so that was, I really felt that. And I was trying to move on, but I just kept hearing this voice saying, like, hey, what are you going to do with what you saw in Mexico? And I felt like, for me personally, I really felt like I was gifted in science and math and creative, and I really wanted to do something in engineering. But then I was also hearing, like, hey, go into missions, do something in missions. And I really didn't know what those two meant together. there were
Right.
groups back then. I think Engineers Without Borders was actually founded in like 2000, and I graduated in this was like the summer of '95. So there was like, there weren't groups like this back then, and so I thought I was kind of crazy, but I really wanted to do something. So I decided, maybe I was supposed to do both, and I'm gonna go find an engineering school that has like a focus in this area. And I went to
Mm.
Masai College because they were ahead of their times. They had like a big service learning program before it was a cool thing. Now a lot of colleges and universities have that. And I was just kind of taking one step at a time and trying to see like what that meant, and where, like I said, I'm a person of faith, like where God would lead me. That was super important for me. And I ended up at Depew Synthes thinking it would just be a couple years, because like I mentioned, I
Okay.
grew up in Warsaw, so like the orthopedic capital of the world. It was always like, the background there in Warsaw, Indiana. And I thought I'll work here for a few years. I had done an internship there, and it's funny how a few years turned into
And I feel
20
like they
years.
suck you in. They
It
suck you
does.
in,
It
then
does.
you
It's
just
like,
kind of stay.
you can't leave. Somehow I finally got out, but yeah, I was there for 20 years. Yeah, and uh, looking back, it was an amazing time. Like I really enjoyed my time while I was working for Depew Synthes, and it was during that time when I was working my full-time job that opportunities started to open up. So there was a lifetime missionary at my church who was in the Central African Republic. He was starting a new water organization, and he knew I was interested in these things. And in
Mm.
2000, so I graduated college in 2000. In 2004, I believe it was, he asked me to join as a founding board member for Water for Good. So I joined.
Okay.
While I was working at Depew Synthes, I was taking trips to the Central African Republic,
Oh, wow.
and I started to, just kind of my mindset was like, how can engineers help? And I just started to ask questions, and over time these technical issues popped up. And I specifically remember on one trip, I think it was around 2010, I was talking to the founder, and I said, hey, I got a group of engineers at Depew Synthes who'd love to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a project, and I'm on this trip, and he's talking about these technical issues, and then keeps talking about how these guys in Columbus are going to help him solve these issues. I kind of keep my mouth shut. I
Okay.
don't know who he's talking about, but Greg Bixler and these guys in Columbus at this R&D firm called Battelle are going to help him. And I think it was after like the third comment, I was finally like, Jim, I got a group of engineers here in Warsaw where you're found, where Water for Good headquarters is. Why don't you talk to us? Like we're right here. We can help you.
Right.
Who are these guys at Battelle you keep talking about? And he's like, hey, I need to connect you to. You really should talk to Greg Bixler. Greg and I had a conversation in 2010 that changed both of our lives. We got together and realized we both had common purpose and passion for using engineering to serve people in low-income countries. And we started talking about what that would look like, and initially just started serving with Water for Good.
Mm.
Jim said, if you could design a hand pump that would last longer and go deeper than current hand pumps, you'd help a lot of people. We're like, hey, that sounds like a good first project. So we got
So
it.
how did that project come about though? Because that was the first
That
project.
was the first project. Yeah. So like I said, Greg, who's my co-founder, he worked at Battelle at the time, and I was at Depew Synthes,
Mm-hmm.
subsidiary Johnson and Johnson, and both of us had been talking to our friends in our engineering friends in our departments. So we kind of had people teed up, and we got back and we had a phone call. We're like, hey, we should really help Water for Good with this hand pump project. And we sent out emails to our departments to just saying, hey, who would like to help engineering a new hand pump for Africa? I remember this meeting vividly. I had 15 people show up. It was just like over lunchtime, and Greg also had 15 people show up. So we had like 30 engineers, and most of these engineers were like very seasoned engineers. We're like, wow, this is a real thing, And about a year later, we were on a plane taking our first prototype pump to Africa, to the Central African Republic, to test it. So things started happening pretty quickly after that.
So what were the technical aspects of the pump? Like how is this pump different than others that we see out
Yeah.
there?
So there's millions of hand pumps installed around the world, and there's two that are like open source hand pumps. It's called the IndyMark. One's called the IndyMark 2, the other's the Afrodev, and they have their merits, but they also are they're they're very low quality. They don't last. They're not reliable. From a design perspective, they're limited. They can only go to a certain depth, and there's a lot of places in the world where the water tables are decreasing for various reasons, climate change being one of them.
I have to ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
What does water tables mean?
Okay, like where the water is, right? So like, if you drill a hole in the ground, you're going to hit water in most places in the world, right? And just like, here in Ohio or in Indiana, you're going to hit it pretty soon. In other places in the world, it's going to be deeper. Okay. In a lot of places, it's getting deeper because of climate change and deforestation and other issues. So we were looking at different pumps, and actually Jim, the CEO of Water for Good at the time, he had 30 pumps in his network of like 1,000 pumps that were these old pumps that were like designed and built in the 70s and 80s, and they were still running. He's like, if you can make a pump like this, like that would be great. And we actually looked at that pump, and it was a progressive cavity pump, which has a rotor, like a stainless steel rotor, and a elastomer stator. So there's not a lot of check valves and moving parts. It's pretty simple. Doesn't have like catastrophic failures. And we thought, how can we make improvements on that? The principles were sound. So that's where we kind of looked at what's been done in the past and what worked, what was very robust and reliable, and built off of that. Where if you look at those other pumps that are available, they're piston pumps. So they have inherent weaknesses and how deep they can go, and how wearing parts that they have. So we built off of this pump that was discontinued, and we took our first prototype to the Central African Republic in 2011, and it was what we call a good learning opportunity, which means that it didn't work.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah. One thing we learned is
it did.
Hey, don't take your first prototype, halfway around the world, and into the middle of the jungle to test it. So we came back right away. We drilled a borehole well in Ohio to test.
Wait, so what happened?
So what happened is we had a mistake on basically what type of pipes would be available when we got to Africa. We didn't ship everything over, and the direction of the rotor didn't align with the direction of the threads, and so wanted to keep on. It sounds so stupid now when I say it out loud, but it was unscrewing itself. So we got that fixed. We went back and we got fixed. The whole thing basically proved that the concept was sound. That pump itself wasn't the best, so we just had this misunderstanding of what pipes would be available when we got to Africa. But the good thing was it kind of showed the proof of concept. And when we got back, we realized we needed more than just volunteers. We needed like some industry partners. We posted a few photos online, and a guy from California contacted us and said, hey, that pump you're designing looks a lot like the pump that I used to put in the 70s and 80s that was discontinued. You should talk to my old boss, who happens to be in Enon, Ohio. He started his own pump company. And we're like, oh my goodness, that's right down the road from where we are now in Columbus. It's like an hour away. So we call up Mike, and he invites us down to his company, and we tell him what we're doing, and his job out hits the floor. He's like, oh my goodness, you're bringing back this pump. I was part of the team that killed that project. I used to work for that company. And I always regretted it. It was a for-profit thing. These other pumps were entering the market. There was a lot of headwinds. We decided, we just couldn't make money on it anymore because of these headwinds. And so we decided to end that project. Thought it had the potential to help a lot of people. And the time was kind of right for the idea to come back around again and make with improvements, it could be a better pump. So this has kind of been the story all along, is we've had so many partners collaborate with us. So CPEX, which is a pump company, they've been such a great industry partner. A progressive cavity pump has a helical shape to that. It's a very specialized manufacturing technique. You can't just take it to any contract manufacturer and ask them to build it. They chipped in, and he said, hey, I'll build you a progressive cavity pump element to your specifications. Just tell me what you need. And so he chipped in, and all the tooling, all that investment, and CPEX continues to be a wonderful partner that helps us as we continue to scale up and implement live pump around the world.
Wow. So I think that's just a really cool beginning story. So since then, you've left DePuy.
Yes.
So talk to us about like the transition from, you know,
Hmm.
full time at Depew to now full time at Design Outreach.
Yeah, so it was about 2018. It was kind of a point of making a decision. Like
Mm,
design outreach was growing, and my career at DePuy was also growing. And I realized up until that point, I could do both of them, and it was actually helpful for me to be in a corporation. I was able to like help resource the nonprofit through volunteers,
right.
connections. I was the board chairman of the nonprofit at the time, and also helping lead some engineering efforts. But it got to that point where it's like, okay, I got to go one way or the other. I can't continue to do both of these. And it was a conversation with my wife, and really feeling like we feel called to move into design outreach. And that was a tough decision, but I don't regret it. I'm very grateful that I made that leap. And it was in 2019 that I left to join design outreach as the chief technology officer here.
That's so cool. I mean, you just like you're able to just take that leap of faith. I'm sure like people were like, "Oh, you're leaving Johnson and Johnson to do this full time? Good luck."
Yeah. And I might have felt that way myself a few times.
Yeah.
It definitely, I think we've talked about this even before the podcast. You're in a place that feels so secure, but that can be an illusion. It's hard to jump out of that comfort zone, but I'm grateful that I did it. It's been a leap of faith for sure. It's been 5 years now, in almost 5 years, and I think this is where I'm supposed to be.
So since leaving Synthes and committing to design outreach full time, I've seen that like the team has grown. You have like a full staff. Like how
Hmm.
has that been since, coming on full time and really just seeing like now you have new projects too.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about that growth.
When I joined about 5 years ago, I got here, and at least on the R&D team, it was me and our one other person. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
let's go change the world. And
Right.
yeah, we're up to now 12 members on the R&D staff, and overall our team is like over 30 people. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey to see the growth, and it's been so fun for me to see us too. Like we were known for Life Pump, but the vision was always bigger. The vision was always to be a research and product development firm,
Okay.
and that's vision is now coming to reality. It's so neat to see that we can expand and do other projects. We can expand into other product areas. We've been so much known for the work in water, and now we're getting
Right.
involved in sanitation. We're getting involved in medical devices
Mm-hmm.
and global health. And that's really what the vision has been. And I think that's why people are joining, because they see that bigger vision. I think if we had just been the Life Pump organization, I think we would still be doing good things, but it would be a different organization.
I think that makes a lot of sense, though, in terms of attracting engineers
Yes.
that want to do good, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're able to actually come in and say, like, okay, let's think of another problem that's in this realm, work on that, and it doesn't have to just be water.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we see ourselves as a research and product development firm that's focused on the unique needs of people living in low-income countries. And there's a lot more than just water. It can be water. The three areas that we want to focus on are water, sanitation, hygiene. That's one area kind of known as WASH in the industry. And then medical, like helping specifically like rural clinics and hospitals in developing countries. And then soon to be agriculture. We'd like to be able to provide different agricultural solutions, tools to help improve like yields, seed storage, things like that. So we've kind of been exploring that area, developing partnerships, but we don't have any chartered project going yet. But that's really our vision, is what we want to be known as a global leader in research and product development in those areas, and also as an advocate who is really pushing for higher standards. Like, for instance, with hand pumps, you often see like photos of, a new hand pump going in, or even like a submersible pump system going in, and you might have donated to a charity, and you see a happy picture of people celebrating on day one. But what people often don't know is that down the road, there's been a lot of studies that show that the systems break.
Right.
Hand pumps break. Yeah. At any one time, like 30 to 40% of hand pumps can be broken. And, you could raise a standard to 90%. You could say, hey, 90% is great, but still 90% of functionality for hand pump is still like a whole month out of the year that a community might not have water. So as design outreach, we're trying to say the standard should be a lot higher than that. It should be like 98 or 99%. So it's only like a few days down at a time. And, people have water every single day. And that's really what's going to lead to ending that cycle of poverty and transformation in communities. We actually just celebrated 10 years as an organization. And I suppose the follow-up to the story of our first learning opportunity is that a year or two, it was in 2013, we went to Malawi. Unfortunately, war broke out in the Central African Republic. So we had to pivot, and World Vision heard what we were doing and invited us to come to Malawi. And we installed our very first life pump there. And we just celebrated 10 years of, nonstop functioning, 0 days without water, zero downtime.
Wow.
For 10 years. And we actually, if you go to our website, we have a little documentary that we made about the community and how having water, not just water, but water every single day has completely transformed the community.
Wow, 10 years.
Yeah.
See, I think that this just speaks to, I think, your engineering mindset, because I wanted you to talk about, having the background as an engineer, working for J&J, within medical devices and going through that process, what we call the design stages, right?
Yep.
And then transferring all of that knowledge into a nonprofit that does med devices and similar work, but just specifically for low and middle income countries.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that? Like, because I have to think that was super beneficial, right?
Yeah.
You could have been just somebody who had a passion for bringing water to countries around the world, but didn't have that background, right?
Yeah. I'm very grateful for that background. I learned a ton at the Pew, and I feel like we had great managers and leaders who really pushed our thinking, and was exposed to human-centered design thinking tools. We had an industrial design human factors group at the Pew Synthes. So I'm very grateful for the opportunities to learn those ideas, those concepts. And I would say, my co-founder, also Greg, he also teaches these things at his class at OSU. Yeah. So we're both really inspired by IDEO, which is, a design firm in San Francisco that's pioneered a lot of these like human-centered design ideas. And we've taken those ideas and what we've learned, what I learned at the Pew Synthes, what we've learned 10 years of working in low-income countries, and modified that a bit to what we think works best, at least for us, in terms of making sure that we're putting low-income communities at the center of our work and really developing products that meet their unique needs. Engineers are notorious for developing a solution and then trying to find a problem, or thinking some new tech is really cool. So we try to avoid that by going through the human-centered design process. So that's been a huge benefit for me to already have that background. And then also the background in terms of not just design, but also manufacturing. I got to work with a lot of manufacturers and some pretty unique projects. When I left, I was working on a 3D printed titanium knee implant, so I got to, even some specialized manufacturing techniques, and seeing how that whole process works of bringing new manufacturing techniques online and validating. And so, I had a lot of really great opportunities to learn there.
I do want to ask though, so the design process at, a company like J&J compared to the design process at a company like Design Outreach, what are the differences that you see? Because, in my mind, if you need to do like a validation, right? Or do like a validation lab, you need to be in that setting, right?
Yeah.
And that's not easily attainable when you're in Columbus, Ohio, right?
Yeah.
So like, how do you work around all of that in order to create your products?
Yeah, so we've tackled that in several ways. One is we try to do as much prototyping and testing here in the US, like not taking a fully developed idea like
Right.
way around the world and spending a lot of resources in your first testing. So we have a test well, we have an area that, we can dig latrines. We do a lot of simulated use tests, like, with our new medical device we're working on here in our lab. And we actually just expanded our office. So we've been able to build out some prototyping space here that we can make and break things. So, I mean, it's basic design thinking, try to learn quickly, fail quickly. So you can learn from those opportunities early on rather than waiting until you've invested a lot of time in that. But then if you get to the point where you do need to do testing in the field, and we've actually opened a field office in Malawi.
Oh, wow.
So in the early days, we were always working through implementing partners like World Vision or others.
Right.
And that was great. And they were so generous and with their time and resources. But we got to the point where we realized if we want to do testing, those organizations they're busy people, and but we realized that another part of our design process is doing field testing, early on, just to get feasibility of the idea. And then later on to do more large scale pilots of our technologies, and then do training and advocacy. So some of the projects and the products that we're working on will require some sort of regulatory approval in country. So like, for instance, Life Pump, in Malawi, it required national approval. So really it took an act of parliament in Malawi and Zambia to get national approval.
Oh, wow.
Which we did. And amazingly enough, we have an amazing team in Malawi, and they were able to work with parliament and get that through. But all of that takes work from our team on the ground. We do have an amazing advocacy program there and training program in Malawi. Zambia, we're planning on opening an office in Zimbabwe probably in the next few years. We're kind of laying the groundwork for that as well. That was a long answer to your question. The short answer is we have country and staff, and we work with them, corporately partnering with them. And we actually just hired our first engineer in Malawi as well. So we have an engineer there that I'm looking forward to partnering with as well.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that's really cool. So one of your latest projects is within the wound care field. So it's a negative pressure wound therapy device. Now, like you said, like, we're moving away from water for this device. How did this device come about?
Great question. Being an employee for Johnson & Johnson for almost 20 years, I got to have insight into that. I mean, they do work in global health as well. So I started learning about global health and the challenges and the opportunities. And I just always thought it'd be great for design outreach eventually to get into something in this space. And you mentioned like working within the design process at Johnson & Johnson. They're a big company, and there's a lot of policies and procedures. And as the benefit, the pros and the cons of working at a startup, you can be more nimble and scrappy, but you also have less resources to pull from. But I just really thought it'd be an opportunity to be more innovative and quicker. And I was really looking forward to that when I came to the design outreach. So when I first arrived here, we were beginning to partner with like a mission hospital in Zimbabwe. We had a team. And again, this is like kind of human-centered design stuff. Just get immersed in what's happening, right? Get to know the doctors, the nurses, the communities, and see what's going on. So we had taken several trips, and we had helped with a few minor kind of things. I had always been looking forward to actually building a team around this idea. And then a couple of years ago, we hired our first biomedical engineer. And then Mark Heldreth, who was my former supervisor at Diffuse Synthes, he retired. And we have this program called a fellows program where we have mostly retired folks who say, hey, I'm not done yet, making a difference. I really want to, it's my second career. I want to continue to work. And we have 5 fellows working for us. Mark's one of them. He's our medical engineering fellow, and he's leading up our medical team. And when he arrived, I said, hey, Mark, we got some ideas, but I don't want to take the low hanging fruit. Let's do like a landscape review and see what's going on and where are the biggest areas that we can make a difference. So our medical team did a survey of 25 different mission hospitals around the world. and came up with like 8 different themes of where we could, what are the biggest needs. I think some of them are around like patient monitoring and oxygen concentrators, power. There was a whole bunch of different ideas, big ideas where an organization can make a difference. And we had to select one because we're just starting off.
Right.
We're building a quality system as we go here. And something that we didn't even have on our radar was wounds. We weren't thinking of wounds. But that came up as a significant issue. And we started quickly learning about how big of an issue wounds are, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. That was really the start of it. And we thought that's an area that's a big issue, and also an area that kind of aligns with our strengths as an organization, where we felt like we could make a difference in product development with a team of like mechanical, biomedical, electrical engineers.
So this device, you're saying that it's not only going to be affordable, non-electric, reusable, durable, easy to repair, and then can also be operated with limited training.
Yes.
That's high bar, but
it is. Yeah. We talk about, when we talk about Diomedic, we talk about the distinctives. What's different from us from a different like medical device company. When you and I were at DePuy-Synthes, when we were designing the device, we never had to think about, oh, this might be in an open air environment. We always assumed there's gonna be HVAC, right? It's gonna be in a hospital ward environment. Yeah, there's not going to be dust blowing through. There's not going to be insects, potentially eating away at the wires. For the most part, there's going to be competent staff that know how to use it right off the bat.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of perhaps extensive training that would need to go into using the device. There's going to be a supply chain. There's going to be trucks backing up every day to the hospital. In fact, during the time I don't know when you were there, but during the time when I was there, we were switching from designing reusable tools and instruments to disposable. We were single-use instruments for a knee joint, and that is the total opposite thinking of like where like rural hospitals are. I mean, we have an advisory team, and some of the surgeons tell us that in places they'll take their gloves off after the day and clean them and hang them on the line to dry, and use them again the next day. I mean, everything gets reused. So that's really, it's a design for a different environment. That's why I talk about, what are the unique needs and requirements. We need to design a device that's going to last in the elements. There's going to be dust. There's going to be dirt. We need to make it so it can be reused. Most of it can be reused. We have to maintain the consumables at a low level, and make those consumables very affordable. There's economic and financial challenges and pressures on these hospitals as well. And if it's too much of a burden, it won't work for them.
I can't wait to see how this goes. I mean, it's just like, it's really refreshing to me when I see a nonprofit that's doing its due diligence in that sense. One of my last questions to you, in the next couple years, what are you most excited about in terms of design outreach?
Yeah, I just want to throw in here too that our team just got back from a hospital that we partner with in Malawi. They just got back. We've immersed ourselves several times. We've been there without even having a prototype, just talking to the surgeons and learning about their processes in the hospitals and their challenges, their constraints, their strengths. And we in November, we took our first prototypes, and we did some feasibility testing on healthy subjects, healthy volunteers, and it was just awesome. The nurses there who are getting trained specifically on wound care, apparently I've been told they were like, can you just leave this behind for us? So it was just really encouraging for us to see, hey, we're on the right track here. And so we're really looking forward to continuing this work and getting an actual device to patients, to the healthcare providers that are asking us for it, so it can make a big difference in people's lives. So I think for the second question you asked around what am I most excited about with Design Outreach, I'm looking forward to continuing to do more. This is our first project. We're not a life pump organization. We're not just a water or just even a medical device organization. We're a research and product development. And So we look forward to launching this project and then seeing what's next for us. And maybe even before then, our team continues to grow. We continue to dream about how we can grow our capacity and take on more work.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, we came up with a whole bunch of ideas that we could work on, and really it was just our own internal capacity that keeps us from maybe taking on more at this time. But we look forward to dreaming big and doing more in the future. I look forward to seeing the products having an impact in people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Are you hiring?
Are we hiring? You can go look at our website. We kind of have a unique model where we have engineers join our team through support raising, which I could get into a whole nother conversation about what that's about. If you're interested and want to learn more about that, I'd be happy to answer questions. But yes, you'll see project engineering positions on our website.
Amazing. So how can people get involved with Design Outreach and get in contact with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning that we had a lot of volunteers help us, and it's still the case. So we have, last year we clocked like 8,200 volunteer hours, and these are engineering hours. So it's pretty impressive that people are willing to give of their time so freely. And, we're always interested in talking to volunteers who may want to help out with our engineering projects. We have the fellows program as well. The difference between a fellow and a volunteer is, a fellow is someone who technically behind the scenes is a volunteer, but they say, hey, I can give like 2 days a week, and they commit to helping lead our projects and mentor our younger staff. So that's an opportunity as well that people can get involved in. There's always the opportunity just to follow along with what's going on. So, we send out frequent communications and stuff if people just want to know what we're up to. And if there's someone that's specifically interested in the negative pressure wound therapy project, like either because they're at a mission hospital or have a connection somewhere, like they could feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk about opportunities there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Abe.
Thank you, Hedel. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to learn more about today's topic and guest, head over to the show notes linked in the description of this episode. There, you can get access to resources, links, and ways you can get involved in the pursuit for global health. And if you loved this episode, don't forget to write me a review on Apple Podcasts and rate the podcast on Spotify. It helps me get in front of more people just like you and continues to elevate the causes we are so passionate about. I'll see you in the next one.